There you are, my friends. It is I, the Rakugo Master. I have come today because Rory from Switzerland has asked some questions about Rakugo.
Well, Rory, I am here to answer all of your Rakugo questions. So, let's get started, shall we? I've got your list of questions right here. You're trying to understand what a Rakugo performer is expected to do with his voice. For example, does he have to speak directly to the audience? And if so, how? Well, there isn't a law, at least not that I'm aware, that says a Rakugo artist has to speak directly to the audience. But that said, that doesn't mean it's not a good idea because, who else would you speak to? They're the audience and you are trying to engage them. And some of the most engaging things you could do is, to look at them with your eyes, let them see your expression. And so if you're kind of looking down, if you're looking over here or over here, you might lose them. And Rakugo is one of those things where, in some theater, you cannot break the fourth wall. In Rakugo, I don't think that fourth wall really exists. It's very much like you mentioned that you were getting into stand-up comedy, and there's a lot of similarities in stand-up comedy and Rakugo, which is more sit down on the pillow or the mattress comedy. But you are really trying to engage the audience. And keep in mind, it is a tradition, and we tend to think about our experience today in performing. And even if you watch some modern Rakugo artists, one of the first things you see them do is sit down and they've got a microphone in front of them. But for the sake of your IB theater and performing a tradition, think about it. Traditionally, hundreds of years ago when they were doing this, there wasn't a microphone for them. They were having to really connect with the audience, to speak loudly to the audience. And who knows how many people were in that audience. It could have been just a few. It could have been a whole lot of people. And so, all going back to say, looking at the audience, connecting with the audience, telling the audience a story, bring them in. That's a really good thing to be doing. So again, while I don't believe there's a specific law of Rakugo that says that you can't look up here or even if you have to look away for a second, like you're talking, well, Rory, let me tell you, look up in the sky. There's a big airplane. I looked away for a second. It was to emphasize it, but then I'm back with you. And I'm back trying to pull you in and make you part of the story. All right, let's see what the next question is. Is he expected to react in specific ways with stylized laugh or exaggerated sigh? I don't know if you're expected to, but again, it's can be a good idea. Especially since, again, think like I'm right here. I'm right next to a camera. I'm right in front of a camera. I don't really have to exaggerate too much. You're going to see what I do. If I do a sigh, you're going to see that. But again, think in terms of the Rakugo tradition where there was no cameras. And what if people came to see a Rakugo artist and it was a very big crowd and people are way in the back? You're going to have to do exaggerated movements for the people way in the back to be able to see what you're doing. Maybe the people that are right up front can see, but that means the people in the cheap seats aren't going to get much of a show. So yes, oftentimes you will see a Rakugo artist do these big exaggerated movements, and really it's part of the tradition. This isn't just true in Rakugo. Anytime you go back, to theater practices, you will see lots of people in the theater doing these big, grand movements. And those movements, again, they're not necessarily for the people up close. They're for the people that are far back because they want to see these. You mentioned a sigh. A sigh can be very subtle. people in the front will notice that, but in the back, you're going to have to,
Hey, what a terrible day.
something big like that. Stylized laughter. Again, perhaps not a rule of Rakugo, but there is, maybe a reason why people do this. A big laughter so that everybody can see it or that they know who's laughing. Is it the I mean, what is the laugh going to be? Probably some weird, exaggerated type of thing for the purpose of character. And those big, exaggerated laughs make it more interesting. And that's really what it is. So much of it is about is making it interesting for the audience. I mean, really, what does a Rakugo artist have? He's sitting here on a pillow that, I've got my pillow right there, as you can see it on the camera. He's got one prop that he could use. It's the fan. He doesn't have a lot to work with. So, and like you mentioned, you're getting into stand-up comedy. I have heard stand-up comedy described as, a man or a woman with their microphone against the crowd, and that's all they got. Stand-up comedy is similar, man. You don't even have legs to work with. You've got a prop, and what are you going to do to make it interesting? So you better be utilizing different voices, different character voices, and different facial expressions to make it interesting. I've seen some Rakugo artists that, honestly, they bored me out of my mind because they didn't do different voices. And that comes upon some of your next questions there that I read. But I would see what what are you capable of when you do your demonstration? Can you do voices? Can you do facial expressions? Because if you can, you should. And you should do everything that you can to pull that audience in. All right, let's look at the next question. Okay, or enact different characters in specific ways. Are there certain kinds of voices he is expected to put on for different character types? Now, I've seen Rakugo performers perform different characters, and they haven't even changed their voices. And again, that's boring to me. But again, you don't have to do it. But it doesn't make it very exciting if you don't. I saw one performer, and I shouldn't. I don't mean to belittle another person's performance or anything like that. I was just saying that for me it wasn't particularly interesting because I like the voices. But maybe other people watching, they don't like voices. Maybe it falls into taste. So you could say you could do it both ways. But I saw a person doing it and like, hey, Tom, would you like to get a bowl of fish? Yeah, Bill, that sounds really good. Well, let's go get that bowl of fish. Good, and some crackers. Well, there's a conversation, and they did it just by looking one way, looking the other way. Like one character is looking this way, the other character is looking back. They give their name, like, hey, I don't know, whatever name I can't remember the names I used, because they were boring names. Well, I should say, not, my apologies to anyone who had those names. I don't think those names are boring, but it's not an exaggerated name. I like to use exaggerated names right there. So, but what I like to do is to put voices on there, and that makes it interesting for the audience. Like a, hey, Rodrigo. Oh, no, that was the same voice. Hey, Rodrigo. Oh, hey, Francois. Hey, you want to go get a big bowl of fried fish? Oh, I'd love to. Something like that, where you're changing your voices, you're looking the different ways. It just makes it interesting for a character. Again, you don't have to, but if you are capable of doing different character voices, different accents, anything like that, go for it, because it will pull the audience in my opinion, a little bit more than if you're just doing this. They want to see what voices you're going to pull out of your hat next. Wow, what is this guy going to do? What other voices does he have? What's he going to do next? You don't want to make it boring. So, the first rule of Rakugo, if you've got the audience in front of you, pull them in and keep them entertained. So when you're getting ready to do your demonstration, you should be thinking like, okay, what is really exciting that I'm doing right now? Am I keeping the audience entertained? And if I'm not keeping them entertained, I should figure something out to do during that spot to make sure that they're entertained. All right, so what do we got for the next question? Is the performer's voice supposed to go up in pitch, pick up tempo, increase or decrease in volume at certain specific points? Total character choice and total story choice for you. It's one of those things like when you're telling a story to people, and so let's say that you're telling maybe a ghost story, and the night was very dark and creepy. When all of a sudden, and did you see, I started off slow, bam, 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 all of a sudden, and I jumped into this, and it's just a character choice. And I don't think that you necessarily have to go up and down in tempo or in pitch, in speed, but it definitely is another way to keep the audience engaged. And if you're studying Rakugo, you're studying Rakugo artists, and you're studying the tricks that they use to keep the audience engaged, they're going to play around with all those things that you said, tempo and pitch and the speed of everything, and they're going to play around with character voices and things like that. But again, it's not like a hard and a fast rule for Rakugo that at certain points in the story you better use this pitch, or the IB scorers are they're gonna notice, and they're gonna take you down from a 6 to a 4 because you didn't use that particular pitch. I do not believe that's going to happen, but they want to see that some of these tools. I think that the assessors are going to say, well, okay, he picked Rakugo. Does he know about storytelling? Is he making good use of the fan? Is he, using different character? Is he using different tempo and pitch? And how is his timing? Is he engaging the audience? What is he doing? And so I think that they would like to see you do these things and then hear you talk about them. When you talk about your preparation for these things, you let them know. It's like, well, I studied Rakugo, and I came to this point in the story, and I really wanted to work on pulling the audience in. So I thought, what could I do with the story, with my voice to bring the audience in, with my expression to bring the audience in? What could I do with the fan? Could I do something creative with the fan to pull the audience in? And if you put that in when you're writing telling them all about your preparation, then I think that they are going to say, like, wow, okay, this guy really does understand it, and this guy actually put some work into it. And let's see, what else do we have here? Does he ever use sound effects with his voice? And if so, how? For which? I've seen some Rakugo artists do some incredible sound effects with their voice. I can't do too many sound effects. I've heard people make all sorts of sound effects with using their voices. I can just do different character voices, but as far as sound effects, they could do some pretty incredible things. But what you could do is you could look in your story that you're going to tell and see, is there any sound effects that you can do? Is there a door knocking? You can use your fan for that one, or what sound effects are in there. Look for ways in your story that you can do these things, and so again, look for ways that you can put the fan to use. They're going to want that's one of the things about Rakugo is they like to see how creatively people can use the fan. Maybe you've seen some of my other stuff, but I like to do the old man where he's like, I make it into the cane and, where's my grandson? I want to go to the festival. Or I use it as a telephone, or can use it as a toothbrush, or whatever. You can, hello. Whatever. But you can look through your story, figure out where can you put sound effects, if you can do them. Where can you put use of the fan? Where can you make the best use of your character? That's really what it comes down to, is you being as creative as possible. Because, again, you don't have a whole lot to work with. Rakugo, they strip everything away. You don't have the huge lights, and you don't have tons of background dancers, and you don't have smoke machines. It's you sitting there with a fan trying to tell a story and keeping the audience engaged and doing it in the best way that you possibly can. And hopefully, it's finding a good traditional story to tell that keeps that tradition alive, and it's about honoring that tradition and doing your best with it. Really telling that story in the most dynamic way that you possibly can. And, think back to how some of the old Rakugo artists must have been. They must have been pretty accomplished and pretty fantastic storytellers to be able to attract that kind of a crowd and have it to be such a respected tradition. Every culture, I think, has a way of storytelling. But Rakugo, it's got its own rules and its own heritage and its own way of doing it, and it's stayed around this long, hundreds of years. So hopefully that answered some of your questions, Rory. But just go out and be as creative as you can. Pull the audience in. Yeah, make that eye contact where you can. And if you need to look away, but make sure that it serves your story. Use the fan. Do the different voices. Be loud. Project. You can talk about that in your when you're preparing your written part of the Rakugo for the assessors, and you can let them know that that you made good use of your voice, that you had to practice. Maybe you're I've never heard you talk. Maybe you're a soft-spoken person. For people like that, they really have to use their diaphragm and project loudly, and that's a challenge for some people. Some people, they're just normally they've got a normally loud voice, and it's a lot easier for them. But if you're a soft-spoken person and you really had to work on your voice in order to project, then you should let them know about that. They're going to want to hear everything that you did to make your Rakugo performance better. So, all right, Rory, I hope that helped you out. And if you have any more questions, you know where to find me. Take care.